Brisbane, Australia. This is episode 76 of The Normal Blokes, a podcast dedicated to improving the competitive 40k experience. I'm Dineeth, and today we're once again joined by Liam.
Hey everyone.
And we've got some really special guests coming straight out of the Gladiator Gaming's team event on the weekend. We've got Normal Blokes players Brian Lakeland. Say hi, bro.
Hey guys, how we doing?
And Sam Rubino.
Hey everyone.
So we thought we'd do a bit of a recap episode. These boys played at the event on the weekend. It's really cool to see a team event popping back up in Brisbane, especially with all the recent, the lack of events we've had locally. It's really good to play teams, and especially for some players who haven't played teams before, it's really good to see a lot of new players there. For anyone who wants to check them out, The Art of War Down Under had some really cool streams, and our own Luke Pearce was helping commentate with Nick Standing. So I think if anyone wants to see how some of the top games went, check that stream out. It was cool, wasn't it? They had like 4 cameras going on 4 tables.
Yeah, it was. Very cool.
I was actually really impressed with how that stream worked out. I mean, commentating 4 tables is pretty intense, but it has that kind of professional vibe that I thought was really sick.
Yeah, and it was almost like you could see in real time like the differences between a team event versus a singles event. Like there's so many things in motion at the same time, and there's different rounds like spinning different ways, and it was really cool. But yeah, I guess before we start, Brian, tell everyone a little bit about yourself coming on the show.
Yeah, of course. So I guess I've been playing 40k for a good couple of years now. I actually started my first game against Liam, and he beat the living crap out of me. So naturally, that made it a competition. So I guess I played a couple of years in a 7th, most of the way through 8th, and now into 9th. So mostly Dark Elder, bit of Harlequins, and I don't know, a whole bunch of different stuff in between. So yeah, that's about pretty much
nice, man. Me and Brian had a great run on Deathwatch at the end of 8th. It was good.
Oh yeah, good couple of games, and then 9th edition hit. We're like, all right, that's on the shelf now.
Yeah, not for long, boys. I got some fucking plans for Deathwatch. Don't worry. But so Sam, tell everyone a bit about yourself. First time on the show.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, boys. So I used to play like 7 years ago now. At the end of 7th edition, a bit. I was playing Elder or Craft Worlds now back then. And then I had a pretty long hiatus from the game, and then basically just got back into it pretty much the start of night, so really recently. And I've just been rocking the good old Drukhari pretty hard since we started, and yeah, it's been good. It's been good fun.
Yeah, man. A lot of Talos, a lot of Ravagers, a couple Incubi units, terrifying shit. So it's good.
All the good stuff. All the good stuff.
Man.
The new codex is coming. Be afraid.
So I guess we'll start with Brian and Sam, and then move on to Liam, because we hear Liam talking a lot on this show, so we'll push him down to the back.
That's very fair.
But I guess we'll have a chat about who was on your team to start. So Brian, Sam, you guys were on the same team, hey?
Yeah, we were. Sam and I were on the same with Wayne and Rob. I was playing Harlequins, Sam was on the Drukhari, Rob was on his Slanesh army, and then Wayne was with his good old Death Guard.
Yeah, nice. And it was really interesting, right? Because obviously you've got heaps of experience with Drukhari, and Sam's playing that army too. And Wayne's got mad experience with Chaos, and then you've got Rob who's playing Slanesh. It was almost like you had little buddy teams. It was awesome.
Yeah, it actually kind of worked out that way pretty well, to be honest.
Yeah, true. And Liam, who was in your team, man?
So I played with Ben, who was playing Necrons, the sort of classic OBSEC Necrons. I was also playing with Brent Piggott, who was playing Death Guard, a 60 Plague Marine list that was all too familiar. Mm-hmm. And last but not least, we had Zach Morgan playing some Grey Knights, his own sort of special flavour on that one.
Nice.
I was really excited to bring Brent and Zach to this team event, because neither of them had ever played in a teams event before. They were super stoked.
Nice. And look, I mean, that's really cool. It looks like a lot of the teams actually didn't really have like a stacked lineup of people who'd played teams before. It had a couple of experienced players as well as a few new faces, so that's really cool to see. But I guess before we get into it, I want to ask Sam, as like a newer player who's played a couple of singles events, how did you find teams compared to singles?
Oh man, it was really sick. Like, it's just such a different I guess like vibe compared to a singles event, like just from the preparation to the actual games itself with the matchup process, and just playing with a team, like having a team captain, and especially I guess as a new player, or newish players sort of coming into the game, having that, like you're saying before, like that buddy system where less experienced players get to play in teams with more experienced players, and you kind of have that like mentor, I guess, type relationship. Just makes such a big difference. It was, I'm fully chuffed, counting down to the next one, 100%.
Yeah. I still remember like the first time I travelled to Newcastle with our team, we all got back and like Nathan was just like, man, I don't even want to play singles anymore. He's like, fuck this, I'll just play teams. It's so much fun. But yeah, I guess Brian and Sam, in terms of leading up to the event, what were you guys thinking in terms of list composition and what your team would bring, and what were you expecting other people to bring?
Well, I guess we all asked each other that question, all right, what codex do we sort of want to play? Because we all, I guess, have our own faction that we do love to put on the field. So we sort of started with that, and then we looked at what roles we each wanted to play. So Wayne was his good old classic bully. He loves his mech, and he loves to just put as many people into the dirt as he can. And then we had Rob, who took his all his keepers, which he loves to play. And then we had Sam, who took his Jakari, which was a bit of a MSU style list with a good core. And then I just sort of filled it out with my Harlequins and whatever sort of gap that we needed to fill, which is more of a, I guess, supporting shield kind of list that just could take on just about anything. That's sort of how we approached it originally.
Yeah, nice. And what kind of armies, I guess both to Sam and Brian, were you expecting to play against? Like, what did you have certain things that, like, you had the Death Guard there for, or you had, the Jakari or the Harlequins there for? Were there certain lists that you had in mind to counter or to play across?
I got it. Yeah. So, like, I guess, like Brian was saying before, his list was definitely kind of like the shield list and the thing. Like the Harlequins, we knew they can kind of go into most matchups and score really well just because of like how janky the list is, and like I guess the mass obsec. I guess with Wayno's list, it was kind of just like that big brick of like a bully list. With he was playing like the Plague Burst crawlers and like all the bloat drones and blight haulers and all that sort of stuff. So that was kind of like that kind of list going into it. And then, we had myself and then Rob kind of the other list to kind of fill out and the other sort of matchups. But yeah, I guess we were expecting a variety, and that's what's really great about team events as well, as with the cap on faction limits as well. So you're not going to see just like a spam and, one team of just stacked up factions. So
we
definitely knew there was going to be. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we're definitely expecting to see a lot of Necron lists, which definitely was the case. I think it was actually the most played faction at the whole event, coming at with 5 Necron lists. So, and obviously coming out with the new codex, we're expecting to see that. And then obviously Space Marines was going to be up there, and just general like Imperium lists. We knew there'd be like AdMech and all kinds of stuff coming through. So I guess we were honestly just kind of preparing for basically anything and everything, and when I guess the actual listings for the lists came out, it was like actually a really good mix of a lot of different style lists. Custodies as well were like pretty up there, so it was a really good mix, definitely for sure for the day.
Yeah, like looking at all the armies that you guys have got, you've got like your Harleys and your Slanesh, who are really good in combat, can move quite quickly across the board. And then you've got, Wayne's Death Guard army and the MSU Drakari that can also cover a lot of space. So apparently you got some armies that can really play the primary quite well, which is really cool. Now, Liam, how was your team, I guess, how was your list composition decided, and what did you guys expect? Was it quite similar?
Well, see, I think we kind of did a very similar attitude to Brian and Sam's team. I know some teams really approach list building sort of as a cohesive team, but I've always kind of liked to focus on codex mastery over like list mastery, if that makes any sense. So I always encourage people in the teams that I'm involved in to play the lists that they like the most. And if there's little tweaks that need to be made to make it better for a certain team's environment, we make those little tweaks rather than the big tweaks. So it was good in the sense that the 4 guys on my team, all of our lists kind of complement each other, I felt. So we didn't have to make any big changes, and everyone could play the lists that they wanted to at the end of the day. Everyone could use their special thing that made them feel like that they were playing the army that they'd invented, and that was awesome. Ben was playing OBSEC Necrons, and look, Ben, if you listen to this, I know you think you invented it, but I'm sure you didn't. Brent was playing Plague Marines, which sort of meant that he could fill that horde and durability role. And Sam was really focusing on, my apologies, Zach was really focusing on Grey Knights and focusing on key big Death Star units, which meant he could do the shooting out of line of sight, which nobody else in our team had. And I was playing OBSEC Spam Orcs, which was kind of built to fill that last little role in the team, which was to actually counter other Necron players, because sort of Necrons rely on having lots of sort of big, meaty OBSEC units to move on to objectives. So I took lots and lots of small OBSEC units to sort of try and do what they're doing in a slightly different way and counter them that way. And it actually worked out really, really well. I think the big and awesome part about my team and what I was so happy happened was that nobody felt like they were forced to sort of play anything. Nobody felt like they were, taking a hard one for the team. Everyone felt really confident going in, and that was magic. To be perfectly honest, that was awesome.
Yeah, that's really good, man. And it's interesting how the psychology of playing something that you're really happy to get behind and you really love playing really changes how you play. Like, I've definitely been in the position where I've played stuff, both in singles and teams, that I haven't really been super passionate about, and you actually play worse. Like, you play significantly worse than if it's something that you really enjoy playing or you like the premise behind, right?
Oh, 100%. I think there's really something to be said for that passion and knowledge factor, because there's one thing to say, hey, like, I know all my rules, like, no, I know all my profiles. It's another thing to say, like, I've rolled this particular scenario so many times because this is my favorite army and I play it all the time, so I know intuitively how these things are going to turn out.
Yeah, for sure. And all right, well, moving to Brian and Sam's team, when you got, when all the lists became public, when you could see everyone's list and you could do your matchup spreadsheet, how did things pan out, and what were you thinking going into your matchups in terms of team roles and things? Did that initial plan we just talked about for you to did that change when you saw the other lists, or did you kind of keep it the same?
I think we more or less kept it the same, actually, because I guess with Rob and Sam, they were still new. We kind of wanted to put them into games that they could have a really good challenge and do well. And I think, like Wayne and I, Wayne tried to, I guess, be that bully list, and I tried to be that shield list. So that didn't really change too much once the lists were released. So I guess looking at most of the teams, we had in most of them we had 1 or 2 people where they were really red for pretty much everyone else. So it was, I guess, my role to try and take that one for the team. I don't know, Sam, do you think anything else really changed in terms of how we approach the matchups from that?
Yeah, I guess once we had all the lists and we did the spreadsheet and, we kind of color coded everyone's matchups and stuff, it we kind of stuck to, I guess, the plan, with Wayne's list kind of being like that list that would go in and bully, and then Brian as the shield, and then we just pair up the rest as we'd kind of go. But I guess that would change depending on some rounds. I think actually for the first round, we actually championed myself because all of mine were yellow, and then so we kind of just put myself into that, and then would try and get the upper list in the team to get into the matchups where we knew they would score max points. And then if you could use it if someone had just 4 reds or something, then maybe we'd champion them and then use the others to try and get the good matchups to make up the points and stuff like that. So I guess there were some interesting thoughts as we went into some of those with who we were going to pair and who we were going to match up, but pretty much most of the rounds were pretty much that, with Brian kind of mainly being that shield, and then the rest kind of either getting put up or paired into what we thought would work best.
Yeah. So I think overall we did okay in terms of pairing. there was a few matchups where we were like, oh crap, this is going to be a hard one for pretty much most of the guys, so we need to try and do as much as we can. I think overall, I think we did pretty well with it. Like, I think we.
Yeah. Well, we went. So our actual results on the day, we went. We lost our first round, and then we drew the second round, and then we won our last round. So we actually went 1-1-1. We just it was like it was the perfect submarine, really. Like
That's
we started
awesome.
right at the bottom and like climbed our way back up. So.
Yeah, you're exceptionally average. I love it. That's great. Particularly normal
That's
blokes.
exactly right. That's
We are the normal blokes. So
What about you, Liam? When you saw the list with your team, did anyone like shit their pants that they didn't bring a list that was ready, or did someone have just a full set of greens and it was good, or like, and did that change? It was probably Ben, right? But he's not even here to defend himself. But
No,
yeah,
it's a bit of a low blow if he can't even defend himself. But I think for our team, when we did all our pairings, what we did is, because we had two guys who hadn't done this before, is we said, hey, look, put our classic Google Docs Excel spreadsheet together and said, hey, everyone rate your matchups, and then we're going to have a teams meeting. We're going to go to Beach House, have a beer, have some nachos or whatever, and we'll talk about where you got it, like what we think you can do differently. And if you're overrating yourself, if you're underrating yourself or whatever. And I was, as Dineeth and Brian from playing in other team events, whether you underrate or overrate yourself, either way, it's not great. And I have to say, especially Brent was really, really down rating himself. He was not giving himself any credit at all. You looked at these whole teams of nothing but red matchups where he was saying, man, I'm not sure like my list can do anything at all. And what was really, really awesome is round one, Brent went into what he described as a red or really hard yellow. And after that round where he won, and he won big time, after I was telling him it was a green, he was so happy and so so confident after that first game. It was really awesome. For me though, I was honestly terrified of there weren't too many of them, but I was absolutely terrified of one list in particular, Aaron Green, that Horde list. I realized that absolutely no one in our team had the number of bullets required to kill 150 orc boys. We just couldn't do it. But look, other than that, I think that most of the lists kind of represented the meta pretty well.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And look, it showed that when stuff like that happens, where someone over and underrates, I think that's a really good point, because mid-event sometimes, especially in the 2 or 3 day team events, especially the 2 day team events, you have the opportunity to adjust your matchups after that. Is that something you guys did with Brent?
Yeah, 100%. And it's good having that sort of Excel sheet, because it doesn't mean like one person is managing it all. It means if you think something's different and you're going to back yourself, because one of the key things for all these team events is that you're on a team that takes four to tango in this sort of situation. So if you're going to, say that, hey, one person's got more value than the other, you're completely, misrepresenting the entire point of a team's event. So I 100% back the guys on my team, and that's why we share, control over that Google Doc. And that's why if they want to change their matchups after they've played it once and they think it's better or they think it's worse, I trust them to do that. I trust them to do that 100%.
Yeah, like I can give an example of that actually. Like when we went to Newcastle, one of our players thought he had a really good game against Knights, and round one we paired him into Knights. He went down and he just said, okay, I've got to change this for the rest of the round. We changed it. It affected our next pairing, and because it affected our next pairing, we won that round by like a bee's dick, the tiniest bit, because we didn't put that player into Knights. And it's amazing like how that little change can just affect your future rounds. So that communication's super important. I just wanted to highlight that before we moved on.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. And Brian and Sam, how did the play style, I know you had a couple of newer players with Sam and Rob, but how did the play style of your team influence, what army they played and what position they had in the team?
Sorry, I was a bit distracted. Could you say that question again?
Brian's driving, and I'm sure he's on
Yes,
cruise
I'm
control.
driving.
Don't tell the cops.
Look, I'm not currently on cruise control. I'm going through a few hazards, so I'm a little bit distracted.
Brian drives lightning fast.
So essentially, Brian is soaring spot right now. How did the playstyle of your players influence their role in the team and their lists?
Okay, all right. I think I can answer that one. So I guess, well, we can start with Wayne and Rob. We know good old classic Wayne. He likes to shoot the living crap out of everyone. So I guess that kind of play style really influenced how he was going to build his lists and what kind of role we were going to set him up for. And it was kind of the same with Rob. Like we had a few games with Rob, Wayne and myself, and we kind of knew how he liked to play. With Sam, I think I only had one game with you. Isn't that right, Sam?
Yeah, it was just the one.
Yeah.
Game.
But I guess off that, I kind of gauged how Sam liked to play, and it was very similar to how I like to play. So we kind of knew, based off that, what kind of roles that each of the guys were going to fill, and we were like, what do you want to really play? And as like Liam said before, we wanted the guys to really build a list on what they wanted to use, with a few tweaks, and that kind of made us build our team around how they wanted to play that.
Was I guess it was quite convenient that Rob and Wayne had armies that really fit their style pretty well with the Slanesh Demons and Wayno's army. Tell me a bit more about like what your army can do, specifically the Harlequins, because they're pretty dynamic, right?
Oh yeah, the Harlequins, they're a little bit crazy.
Yeah. So
there's
did
like
you
a
find...
lot of things that...
Sorry, I was going to say, did you find that you were playing, like, even though the Harlequins are super fast and super, like, combat-y, were you finding you were playing super cagey for a lot of your games? Because it sounds like your role in the team was that shield that swallowed up the bad matchup for everyone else.
Yeah. Like, I never really went, right across the table to try and just do as much damage as I could. But that wasn't how the list was built. I wasn't running 15 bikes or anything like that. It was very much designed to be a cagey list that once my opponent would overextend or try and hold an objective or hold important objectives, especially on mission 2, where they were sort of out in the open, I could really pounce on that and really capitalize on them being out of position. And that's sort of how that list played. There's a lot of jank around it where they can, wrap stuff in combat, fall back from combat, fall back into boats, double move, just do a whole bunch of stuff that just people don't really have to think of because they're the only faction that can do it. And that kind of stuff really caught my second opponent off guard, I guess, because it was Vital Intelligence was mission 2, where you didn't actually have to stay on objectives. So every time he would move off an objective, I would run into combat and then fall back onto his objective and take it off him. And like he would kill like a couple of bikes, get it down to one model, and then that bike would fall back onto an objective, take him off it, and I'd get 15 because I'd now hold more than him in his turn. So like just things like that, it just helps swing those little games, like those little things that help get those extra points. So I guess keeping that stuff in mind, it wasn't very much I need to get as many points or I need to just do as much damage as possible. It was very much a shields defensive style list.
Yeah, nice. That's really sick. And what about you, Liam? I mean, we joke that Ben is the perfect soldier for a team event, but like, how did the team you guys had influence what role the players played?
Well, Ben and I, from the very outset, because he and I have played many team events together, we kind of said, look, we really want to make sure that the guys who haven't played a team event before, Brent and Zach, that they have fun and that it sort of is organic in a sense. Like we don't want to favor them or bust them in any particular matchups. We want to make sure they actually have like a proper team's experience. Mm-hmm. So from our perspective, we wanted to make sure that Ben and I were ready to sort of adjust how our games were going as best we could with what happened naturally. We actually specifically made a point of not bussing ourselves into hard games, but also not doing the same thing to them. We tried to make it pretty balanced. Mm-hmm. What this kind of meant, though, was that especially in round 1, when we kind of didn't get our pairings right and our matchups weren't quite on, we may have flown too close to the sun. We
Icarus
Icarused a little bit. Yes, the old anti-submarine play where Ben came over to me and said, "Hey Liam, I need you, can you try and get a few less points because it looks like Zach and Brent are going to win really big." And I was like, "Oh, it's awesome for them. I'll really try." While my opponent moves off all his objectives, which was a bit challenging at one point. So we ended up winning really big round one. So I don't really think our players changed how we paired. We tried to make it pretty natural because we didn't want. End of the day, I didn't want either of the guys who haven't played a team events before to have sort of like a false experience about what teams can be. Yes. Because the reality is you're going to play those games where you get dumpstered, and you're going to play those games where you do really, really well, but your individual performance is completely irrelevant.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a really good way to, bring people into teams, actually. That's sick to hear. All right, guys, now's the juicy stuff. We're going to talk about the rounds. So, Brian, Sam, round one. Who did you play? How'd the pairings go? And how did the games go?
Yeah. So round one for me, I went into some Chaos Knights. It was 9 of those little Forge World Knights that do really well against vehicles.
Holy shit.
And it was the Unkillable Order Change with 3 Units and Nurglings filling that out. So that one for me, I think it was a yellow. I think originally, purely based on, I just wasn't 100% sure how the Knights were going to go against my army because they each put out D6 shots, and then they've got a D6 flame that wounds on 2s, and then they put out like 5 attacks in combat hitting on 2s. So it really came down to, I think, my opponent as a player and how he was going to play that mission, and what secondaries he was going to pick. But yeah, that was me round one. What about you, Sam?
I copped the Sisters of Battle in round one, which was a very interesting game. I think he had like it was like 20 something melter shots a turn, so it was pretty scary. He had like the multi-melter retributors. I think he had 2 squads of them, and then just a bunch of just 5-man sister squads with multi-melters in each with the cherubs for the like miracle dice shenanigans. So that was a pretty hectic matchup, and then I got the lightest table terrain-wise, so it was pretty difficult for me to hide all my stuff. So I had to really change my approach for that one, kind of going in for I think that was a yellow for me, but kind of just based on like the table, I was kind of just going more for trying to score as many points as possible. So
it sounds like you saw the underside of the bus, bro.
Yeah. But no, it was actually a really, really good game. So and this is probably a really good example of like taking from like from Brian, like some of his advice on the game. So I played like really cagey and took While We Stand on my Dizzy Ravagers and Drazar, which he wasn't really expecting, and put like the Ravagers and Deep Strike and sort of brought them down late in the game, and just played really cagey and got max points on that, and just got other points where I could and just played banners, and he basically just marched up the board towards me. And yeah, I think he won by like 20 points overall, which I can't remember what the conversion was, but it was kind of like a small win to him. So yeah, so it was kind of a pretty good outcome, and that's what I kind of love about teams. Like, even if you go into a matchup where you're like, okay, this is going to be really hard for me to win, you're still like really stoked and got something to play for to kind of help the team overall. Which is just the coolest thing about teams, because even if you lose a game, it can feel like a win, which is like so cool, I think.
Yeah, it's awesome. Like every little point matters. Yeah. How did the other 2 guys in your team go?
Well, so Wayne went into Death Guard. It was like a Death Guard v Death Guard matchup, which is really interesting. And then Rob copped the... What did he go? He copped the Necrons with the Silent
He copped the Obsec Necrons with the Silent King.
Yeah, so that
was very much it was 4 keepers versus
he went under the freight train.
Yeah,
he did. 100%.
I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
Rob
there was
knows
Sam
that
under the
game.
bus, and then poor Rob took the freight train, and then Wayne and I apparently
Jesus.
took the good ones. Yeah, so much for helping out the new kids.
So good. But yeah, I think Wayne had a pretty rough time, and then I think Rob actually did pretty well from memory. Like it was a pretty small loss, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
I
I
remember
think
it
it
being
was.
quite tight.
Yeah, it was a small loss in the end. I think they got close to the end. I think.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
right.
they did run out
Yeah.
of time, which kind of forced them to have to stop halfway through, which was a bit of a shame. But yeah, I think he ended up with a small loss in the end. So
He did well.
considering, he did. Yeah, well, considering he had 40 obsec warriors and then 27 scarabs to deal with, it was 20 something scarabs to deal with. It was pretty hectic for him. But yeah, he did really well in that one, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's sick. All right, Liam. Sounds like you guys went pretty hard round one, but talk us through your matchups in the games.
So round one, we played one of the Gold Coast teams, which is awesome. They had a Necron list that had a couple of Catans, and while there's Necrons are one of the big bads at the moment. One of the things about this list that actually made it unique was that it was the only list at the event that had 2 Catan shards, or had any Catan shards for that matter. But because everyone else in my team, with the exception of maybe Ben, was quite elite armies, the Catan shards are actually really hard for us to deal with. So a lot of the people in our team sort of were trying to avoid that, so to speak. Particularly Brent and Zach actually do struggle with Catans a little bit. So I was actually really trying to sort of hunt that Necron army a little bit, because I think I got the tools to deal with it. They also had a Tyrannid army that had a whole bunch of Gene Stealers in it, and the Swarm Lord. And we all know the trick there. That thing can move like 60 inches and charge you, which is just oppressive. The problem with that is that my army has absolutely no models to screen. So if I play against that army, I'm going to die, and I'm going to die horribly. I'm going to go under the freight train. That was the freight train for me in this team. So in this particular matchup, we really wanted to make sure that Zach got a heavy table because he's playing Grey Knights, that Brent got something he could throw poo grenades at, that Ben got something that he could stab to death, and that I was not playing the Tyranids. And I think we did really, really well pairings-wise. We got sort of everything that we wanted, actually. So I ended up playing the Necrons. Ben ended up playing that Tyranid list that I mentioned. Brent ended up playing AdMech, which was a game that he thought he wouldn't do well in, and I'm so proud of him that he proved himself wrong, and it really gave him the confidence boost he needed. And finally, Zach ended up playing Space Marines, one of the the big bads, the scary sort of list at the moment. This is his first game ever at a teams tournament, and he crushed it. In fact, Zach not only crushed it, when I looked over and was watching him play, he was doing everything perfectly, putting everything in terrain, using all the tricks that we were trying to show him before the event. I was super happy how he not only had a lot of fun playing, but he like tried to soak up every single piece of advice he possibly could along the way. That was just awesome. So round one, we got 4 wins. We were really, really stoked about that, but we also definitely realized that we were Icarusing pretty hard.
So we have the Abnormal Blokes team right at the bottom of the pairings. We got wait, what was your team name? It was hectic, wasn't it? Wasn't it Globo Gym?
Oh, the Globo Gym Cobra.
Yeah, we had Globo Gym up the top.
That's the best.
All right, Brian and Sam, round 2. How'd it go? Tell me about the pairings. Tell me about the games.
Well, this is actually pretty easy for me because round 2 and 3, I almost played the identical Custodes list, so it was pretty good. Sam, do you remember what you took round 2?
It was AdMech round 2.
AdMech, yeah.
Oh, this is a fun one for Sam to discuss. Yeah.
Then Wayne took on the Dark Angels, which was the good old classic brick with 2 Talon Masters running behind it, and that was literally a wall up against a wall. And then poor Rob actually took on Orcs, unfortunately. We had to. I think we put him up first because we needed him on a good table because he actually didn't have great matchups. I think this round. I think that was what we ended up with. So this one was very much if we lose, unfortunately, we need to put him on a good table. And then I think the Orcs kind of kind of snatched him up. And then literally everything went right, I think, for the Orcs, and he got first, got the right side, pinned him in a corner, and it was downhill from there.
I think I remember looking over at that table, and it was like the second turn in, and like the Orcs had just covered like 90% of the table. I was like, oh no, Rob is on the pain train
Orcs,
right now.
Yeah, the poor guy.
Yeah.
So that was our matchups for round 2. So I think overall it wasn't too bad. I think except for where I put up, because I think I was champion that round. Because I think I had pretty consistent matchups across the board.
Yeah. And then I think I got thrown up, and then they paired the AdMech into me.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us about that game, Sam.
So I'm fairly sure that was like a red/orange for me for the AdMech, because just AdMech, obviously one of the boogeyman lists for sure. So he had like a bit of an interesting take on his list. So like he had kind of, it wasn't just like breacher spam or anything like that. He kind of had like a mix of breaches. I think he had 2 times 3 of the Castellan robots, and then 2 of the flyers with like the mortal wound bombs, and then a bunch of raiders and like priests and the transports. So it was kind of like a bit of a mix of a lot of different stuff, but it was still pretty potent. And he was running like Mars with all the exploding 6s and stuff, which is pretty abhorrent on those Castellan robots. But yeah, so I think, what was the mission? I think it was Vital Intelligence for that one. Hey, Brian.
Yeah, it was,
round. Yeah. So, so that game, that was, the Grots did work in that one. So with my list, I basically had a core of a big blob of 10 grotesques with Vexator Mask Homunculus, and then basically like MSU Venoms of Racks running around, and then Ravagers kind of fire support behind that. But the Grots just basically went in hard, like straight down the middle of the board, and just tagged like all his gun line, and then the Venoms were just kind of spread over the board, and I took banners. I'm just putting banners up everywhere, and yeah, it was good. And I did While We Stand We Fight with the Ravagers and stuff again, which seemed to work really well actually on the day. But yeah, so I actually got a pretty good win on that one, which is like awesome. Going into like a pretty hard matchup, so that was really sick. But yeah, I think the funniest moment of that game was the Grots were going into the breaches, and he was about to Overwatch with all his flamers, and I went to pull out the cheeky Vect, and I remember I was just about to roll it, and Brian's kind of like looking over, and I'm just like, I need to roll anything but a 1. And then I rolled a 1, and Brian's just like,
I'll look over to go, oh, how's this going? And then you're like, all right, Vect, I'm going to stop that because I don't like the look of that at all. And then you roll a 1, and I just look up and see your face, and it's like,
Sam, didn't you do that like the only time we've ever played? I swear you rolled a 1 like the very first Vect, and it is like, oh, that's bad.
I think like half the Vex I've done I roll a 1, to be honest. It's a bit tragic.
I'm gonna derail this conversation, but if we want to talk about bad ones for rolling, I played against Nick the other day, and he had 2 or 3 shock attack guns, and they were for his While We Stand We Fight, and he chucked one into a truck, and I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna kill the truck. I'm gonna see what happens. It's like in the middle of his army. I blew it up with Eradicators. The truck explodes, there's like 1 billion mortal wounds, and then he's like, oh, I better not roll a 1, and he rolled a 1, and the thing died. And I was like, oh. So yeah, bad, fuck. You know what sucks? You can't command point that shit now. It fucking sucks. Yeah. But anyway, back to it, boys. I've got the scorecard up for that round. It looks like Brian scored a big fat 18, Sam a big fat 15, and Wayne got a draw against the Dark Angels. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it was actually that was an interesting game actually. It being Vital Intelligence, they both literally just turned it into Hammer and Anvil, and was like, this is my side, this is your side, I'm going to shoot you, you can shoot me, both of us are not dying, and then that's game.
That's perfect.
Yeah. It was, I think they just literally were just banging each other's heads against a invisible wall, and then, just somehow met in the middle. And we just kept looking up to see Wayne just going, I just can't kill these Marines, they just don't die. And then, his opponent was just like, I just can't kill these tanks. They're just not dying. And I was like, yep.
Oh, fuck, that's funny. So that's actually kind of cool that because that Dark Angels list, like having played it, it doesn't do much damage at range, but the fact it doesn't die means it has a really consistent like just playing on its own game. So it's really cool that Wayne could keep up with that, and he got a draw, and then unfortunately Rob losing it. So you guys got a draw in the round, hey?
Yeah, I think we were like 1 point off getting the win.
Yeah. It was crazy close. It was crazy.
My poor 18. I just I let the team down.
Yeah.
It's all Brian's fault.
100%.
So yeah,
when you think he's being modest for like one moment, and you're like, oh wait, no, he's not.
All right.
I'm just back in your box.
So Liam, Mr. Icarus, how did your round 2 go?
So our wings of wax definitely melted. But no, I'm really happy with how it went. So we were a bit nervous because round 2 we copped one of the Art of War teams. We were playing Dan Savage's team. So that was Dan Savage, Josh McGowan, Paul, and who's the last player on their team?
Was Stephen Wade? No,
Andrew Kennedy.
Oh, nice.
Playing Admech. So in that team, there's a few boogeymen in that team. Josh McGowan's obviously a very veteran player playing Necrons. We've got Dan playing his very, very well-tested, very scary Nurgle Demons army. We've then got Paul playing, his bread and butter, which is Iron Hands Marines, which he's obviously very experienced playing. And then AK's playing AdMech, and AK's been around for a very, very long time as well. So he's quite experienced. So we knew that it was going to be a bunch of hard games. And spoiler alert, I suppose, we actually ended up drawing this round, which was really, really awesome. So what sort of happened was Dan, I think, was doing the pairings for their team. Dan really didn't pair how I expected him to. He ended up, I forget who he used as his first put up, but it wasn't what I sort of expected. And because of that, I ended up playing Josh McGowan. Ben ended up playing Paul, which was 2 games that both Ben and I were really, really excited about because we were like, these are 2 really, really good games for us. We also ended up getting Zach playing against AK, playing against the AdMech, which was a game that, we thought could go either way just because it was a dense table. So it sort of gives Zach the favor. And finally, Brent ended up playing Dan, which we knew was going to be really, really hard for him. But Brent and I had sort of simulated something similar to that. We'd kind of sort of talk through what he could do. Now, none of these games kind of went sort of how we wanted them to. The main one we thought would go the way it would was Ben playing Paul. Ben did very, very well. I forget the exact score he got, but he got very close to 20. My game against Josh, look, I knew it was going to be hard, but I really wanted to play Josh because I thought he would absolutely dumpster a lot of the other guys on our team, and I didn't want Ben to play, you never want to have a mirror match on a teams event, right? You don't want to play Necrons to play Necrons.
Yeah.
But it turned something we didn't really expect was Vital Intelligence turned out to be a really, really bad mission for Necrons because they have to sort of split their army binary sort of style, like halfway down the middle because there's no objectives near the center.
Yes.
It sort of meant that he sort of committed half of his force to either side, and once Necrons are committed with that 6-inch pre-game move, they kind of can't move after that. Like they can move, but the maximum movement they've got is 10. So my orcs are actually faster with all the vehicles moving 10 or 12 and disembarking, advancing and charging and stuff like that. So it actually meant that, turns 2, turns 3, we tied, but then turns 4 and turns 5, I actually took the primary off Josh almost entirely. And I sort of stopped him getting scramblers by screening out, which I didn't expect. And a few other things really, really went my way. And I ended up getting a flat 20 in that game, which is not something I expected at all. But then the exact opposite happened in some of our other games. Zach was playing on one of the dense tables, but one of the pieces of terrain didn't quite work out the way that he thought it would. And it actually ended up being a unit that he thought was completely obscured was actually very, very visible and completely out and sort of with their dicks flagging in the wind, so to speak. So his Paladin unit, I think it was Terminators, I can't remember, just got obliterated and wiped off the table. And look, Dan Savage did mean things to Brent. I'm not actually saying he did anything mean, but he played that game perfectly. Brent was telling me all about it afterwards. And Dan ended up picking Brent apart. I think Brent got 1 or 2 points out of that game. So it was really weird. We won our yellows, but we lost greens and yellows as well. It was very bizarre. All of the predictions in that game sort of went out the window. But it ended up being a draw, which was pretty exciting. So we were 1-0, I guess, at this point.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at your scorecard, and it's literally 40-40. Ben's on 18.
Yeah, it's
Liam's on
it's
20.
a dead draw.
Yeah. Ben's on 18, Liam's on 20, Zach on 1, Brent on 1, 40. And, you know, Paul on 2, Josh on 0, Andrew on 19, Dan on 19, 40-40. Wow.
Yeah, so for those who, I guess, don't know with this event, they made it that you have to get the 45 points to win the round. So you have to beat the opponent's team by more than 5, which I think is good. Because I don't think 1 point should ever like really decide the round. Like you should have to beat them by like a reasonable margin. But for a 40-40 draw, like a perfect draw to actually happen, statistically is really, really unlikely. And that's awesome that it actually happened. I'm really stoked by that.
Yeah, man. All right. Well, moving on into round 3, Brian and Sam, who did you guys play, and how did that one go?
Yeah. Well, this was an easy one for me. More custodes. That was almost identical. I think the only difference between round 2 and round 3 for me was he had a couple of extra bikes, so he had a unit of 5 bikes instead of a unit of 3. And then his dreadnought was a little bit different, but everything else was pretty much exactly the same. So it was a bunch of custode guard on foot with swords and shields, the big unit of Forge Worlds Terminators with the Power Fists and the Heavy Bolter version. And yeah, that game went more or less the same as the game in round 2. I guess the mission only being 5 objectives, it was very much focused on the center, which I guess I really used that to try and punish him from, you know, trying to come too close to me. So having those fusion boats in that matchup and in that mission actually really helped. So he got a little bit too close with his bikes, and then 15 fusion pistols just pounced on him, and then those bikes just evaporated. So that was a pretty sad moment for him, I think. So yeah, that was my round 3.
Well, I think me and you, Brian, have had that Harlequins custode game a few times, and it's not pretty.
Yeah, we have.
It is not pretty.
No, it's not. It's like if you get like a centimeter or an inch too close, yeah, I'm just going to pounce on you with everything, and then you're just gone.
Yeah, and Sam, you had a pretty cool game against our very own James Fuller, mate. How did that go?
Yeah, it was really interesting. So James was playing his Grey Knights. It was pretty interesting list. So he had like a big Paladin bomb, like 10 man strong, and then he had like a bunch of characters like Drago and a few others. A Land Raider, which was pretty interesting, and then a few like strike squads and some other stuff. But yeah, no, that was a really good game. So it was a pretty hard mission for me to play that army against, just because the nature of sweep and clear, like Brian was saying, like basically you got to play that game in the middle of the table, with like the one objective in the center and then all the other objectives kind of around it. It's kind of really hard for me in a matchup like that, because he took I think the mission 1's direct assault, where he just gets points for holding that center one. And even with my Grot Brick, that still can't really bully off 10 Paladins, a Land Raider, and all these other like mortal wounds sort of stratagems and stuff he had on his characters. So yeah, so it was pretty it was a really close game actually. So I just lost that by 15 points. It was like the highest scoring game I've ever lost. I think I scored like 79 points and he scored like 94. Yeah, it was really bizarre. Like it was a super high scoring game. Yeah, and I think like 100% the highlight of that game, I think James would agree, was like I think it was like the last turn, this Ravager like moved, spent a CV to auto event at 8, and then with no rerolls, just shot at one of his while we stand characters and just like disintegrated it off the board and like denied him 5 points. And we were both just like, well, damn, that was sick.
Shit.
But yeah, that was awesome. But I think the great thing about that and like the whole team format, so I think that one ended 12-8. So James got 12 points and I got 8 points. And even though I lost that, I think that like just got our team over the line actually to win
Dude,
that last round. From
you
memory.
guys, got 45 on the nose.
Yeah,
yeah,
so-
it just put us over.
Yeah, which is crazy. So it's like even though like I lost that match technically, it actually like won our team the round, which is like why team format's just like
Oh, that's
insane.
sick. And you look at
Yeah.
Rob Hamley getting a 19-1 and 92-43 that round. Just full redemption on round 3 for Rob. That's sick.
Oh yeah, he had
Yeah.
a great game round 3.
Yeah, it was like the opposite of his Orcs game. Like I
Yeah.
looked over, I think it was turn 2, and his keepers and doom nets had covered like 90% of the board, and I was just like, my dude, we're going in here. Like, let's go.
My dude.
Oh,
That
that's
was
sick. Well, what a round to finish off, because that was when I was actually at the event. I dropped in, and I just saw Wayne against Reese's Blood Angels, and there was just a part where I just saw like fucking trikes come back, and like the multi-melter ATVs just rolling up the board. I was like, oh Wayne, no, this is not it.
Oh, poor Wayne. Yeah.
But hey,
Yeah.
that's what you guys needed to do, and you won the round. That's sick.
Yeah, it was dope.
And Liam, round 3, mate, had a bit of a punch up, a bit of a light touch up in round 2. How was your round 3?
So round 3 we played, and I think I said this on the last episode, the winner of the team naming competition, in my opinion, the Art of Milk,
The Art
which I
of Milk.
think is still such a good team name. Hats off to Hayden and Rory for that one. So now look, before this round, Hayden's a troll, and I have a lot of time for Ducky. But Hayden comes to me and goes, "Now, Liam, do you remember our gentleman's agreement where you agreed you'd play me? You know, we'll both be champions." This is not an agreement that we had, by the way. This is just something that Ducky said and expected me to honor. Now, look, the thing is, I don't want to play Ducky because he's an amazing player. He's playing Space Marines, and his list is very, very good at hitting things to death, which happens to be what my army wants to do to him. So this is overall a problem. So I did not agree to be the champion and play Ducky, which is hilarious because he totally predicted what we were going to do as a team, and I ended up playing him anyway. So he sort of just completely outsmarted us there, made us kind of feel like chumps. And look, I never want to be the sort of person who goes that, look, dice pretty much entirely decide a game. And I definitely am guilty of saying that in reverse when I lose games. But I actually ended up winning my game against Ducky. And to be perfectly honest, I really don't deserve to claim credit for that game at all. It was just some of the most preposterous dice rolls I've ever seen in a game of 40k. And that's really saying something. Put it in perspective, 2 scrapjets decided to kill all of his Blade Guard through Transhuman and Feel No Pain. They just picked them all up and killed them. A shock attack gun just decided after moving to kill, a whole squad of attack bikes. 4 attack bikes and some eradicators shooting twice failed to do more than 2 damage to an orc truck. Yeah.
Wow.
So all of these marine melter guns.
That ain't living.
Yep.
Oh, poor Duck.
Yep. Yeah. His plasma inceptors came down, and out of squad of 5, 3 of them died to overheating in that first shooting phase. My war boss, which is worth 70 points, beat to death a Primaris chaplain and 5 aggressors on his own. Just like honestly, every single thing that Duck tried to do just completely failed.
See, I'm okay with this because the last 2 eps that we've talked about Ducks in your games has just been a paddling the other way.
Dude, it's been really bad. I've had a consistent losing rate against Duck. Like it was just getting like actually silly when 5 Meganobs run into 10 Vanguard veterans with storm shields and Feel No Pains, and I'm like, oh yeah, I might kill most of them. 10 dead, wiped, slain to
What
a man.
the fuck?
It's just like it was just getting it was pretty ridiculous. So I ended up winning that game 15-5 or 16-4. I can't quite remember. But it was one of the things that actually made that game really hard, and I have to give Duck credit for this as well, is that we were playing Sweep and Clear, which is that mission with that central objective. And one of the secondary for this one is you get 3 points if you hold that center objective. So Duck took that, and he took the Marine one, the Oaths of the Moment, or some other such broken nonsense, where you get like 2 points if you're in the center of the table as well. So the problem there is he's really double dipping and having to be in the center of the table. So if the game's already going badly for you and you have to throw away more units to come into the center of the table, it sort of compounds and it becomes exponentially worse. So what kind of happened is I did end up going first, and yet another thing that was in my favor. But after it started going bad, he had to keep committing units to the center to get those secondary points. You don't really have a choice. Otherwise, you just lose. And once that started happening, he was just bleeding models and models and models until at the end of the game, I think he had a couple of attack bikes left. That was pretty much it. And there are not a huge number of orcs. There was enough orcs to keep up the primary. One thing that was really clear in this matchup for me is that I'm running a bunch of Storm Boys in my list, which can automatically move 18 inches and are OBSEC. And they almost single-handedly won me the game, just moving across the table turn 1 into out of line of sight and making me do more on the primary than Duck. It was honestly it was really good for my list, but I'm very conscious that it helps when you roll nothing but 6s for your hit rolls. That's really handy. Ben, where did Ben end up playing? Gee, didn't you have the scorecard up? I forget what
I
it
do.
Ben.
I got Ben playing Rory.
Yeah, Ben ended up playing Rory was playing Demons, and it was really, really hard. Like Ben sort of said to me, I'm doing my best and trying to get all the points that we can, and he did really, really well. He got very close to the 20, and unfortunately, I think Brent and Zach got hit really, really hard in that round. I think they both went down.
Well,
20
Brent,
zip, is that right?
Brent got 10 all, and Zach got 3 points, and you guys were on 44 for the draw.
Yeah, that's right. We were a point or two off getting the win in the end. But something that was really interesting to sort of end off that round, and honestly, I'm very, very happy coming with 2 new guys and getting 2 draws against the Art of War teams. That's awesome. Brent and Zach, you guys should be so bloody stoked. Wish I did that well on my first teams event. I think we got absolutely dumpstered at Titans. I think, Brian, were you there for that one? Anyway, that's beside the point.
Yeah, we did.
We got
Remember, we would always look over and the team would just say, guys, I'm dead. And that was every round.
That was awesome. Old hobby dad. But the really interesting thing about the end of that round was that we worked it out sort of after the event. It actually wouldn't have mattered if we won that round or drew that round because of the battle points that we had and because of the battle points that the people above us had. Even if we won that round, we would have come third. And even if we drew that round, we would have come third. So it was actually a bit weird that those last couple of points actually didn't matter just because there's only 10 teams at the event. You can sometimes get spreads like that.
Yeah, very true.
That kind of ended up the tournament for us. And look, I'm not going to lie. I was pretty happy that I beat Duck, but I do owe him a rematch where we'll both roll DW little dice so that neither of us can complain about the number of 1s being rolled.
Oh, jeez. Well, that's a sick end. You guys coming in third. The Globo Gym boys, Abnormals going 1-1-1.
Globo Gym.
Oh, so Liam, you guys went undefeated this event. That's sick.
Yeah, Ben did too.
Ben. Oh, jeez.
Oh no.
Yeah.
It's going to start again.
Yeah,
His record's starting again. Jesus Christ.
Look, I feel like it's story time for the Normal Blokes podcast. Sort of round off this one. There's a bit of a running joke because we go to these team events in Newcastle, which we've spoken about on this podcast before. They're awesome events. The thing is, Ben, who's on my team for this event, does really, really well at those events. And there was a running joke that he was undefeated across like 3 or 4 different team events. And I'm glad he's on my team, but boy, Ben likes being undefeated.
I think the main thing, Liam, is we don't hear this as a story. We hear it from Ben's mouth, so it's even better.
Yeah, so you'd just be sort of having a normal conversation. Oh, hey, Ben, what'd you have for lunch? Liam, did you know I'm undefeated at team tournaments? Or, hey, Ben, how was your weekend? I didn't play in a team tournament. Oh, a team tournament. That reminds me, I'm undefeated at team tournament. It'd actually be incessant. Like there was no way to escape the I'm undefeated at team tournament.
Oh, no. It would just come up randomly in any part of conversation.
Yeah.
If he could drop it, he would.
how's the weather today? Undefeated at the team tournament.
Yeah.
But yeah. So look, Ben did end up losing a game at a team tournament at some point. But he did go undefeated at this team tournament, and I have to give him credit for it. He did very, very well, and he played some really tough games too. So
I can hear the twitch in your eyebrow from here.
Yeah, look,
Yeah.
my head is shaking right now.
Well, hey, it's actually cool to see because Ben's been working on that Necron army for ages, and it's really cool to see him coming out into the tournament scene and doing awesome with it. It's awesome to see.
Yeah, and his army looks great too. And I think at this event in general, there were, as I think Sam mentioned, there were more Necrons than any other faction. Essentially all of those Necron lists had some things in common: Obsec Scarabs, shock and horror. But the majority of them actually had a couple of things that made them unique. Like, I'm really glad that there were essentially no copy pastes.
There was only one Silent King, as well.
Yeah, that kind of surprised me. But
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it was cool.
Well, hey, I guess we've got some more team events coming up. We've got another Gladiator Gaming one in January. I guess we'll start with Brian, then Sam, then Liam. What are you guys looking going ahead for your armies?
Oh, classic clowns, obviously. Nothing different, to be honest. I've played in a few tournaments now with the Harlequins, and I'm slowly leaning more towards players over anything else, to be honest. They tend to do a lot better. You get a lot more mileage out of them than you do bikes, and I'm sure Liam and yourself, Dineeth, can attest to this. Like you guys have played me enough now to know how much better players are over bikes.
The win condition is killing the players, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like, the bikes don't even matter most games, and like if you run 15, you can just half kill units, but they're not obsec, so they don't really matter that much. But if you kill all the obsec players, then you can essentially just play the mission and win. So yeah, I guess just looking more, looking at more what I can do with the players, and see what avenue I can go down.
Nice.
But I am only limited to essentially 2 units and then some characters, so I'm pretty constricted.
Fair enough. Yeah.
how many units does your codex have again, Brian?
A solid 8, I believe. Yep. A solid 8.
That's about
One
a
is dedicated
third.
transport, and then 4 characters. So.
You only need 8 when you have players, though, bro. It's so
That's
good.
exactly right. Yeah,
You,
my codex is it's players.
I'm pretty sure the Space Marine book has more core elite choices than that.
Oh yeah.
Jesus. Oh god.
What about you? What about you, Sam? You staying on the Drakari, mate?
Yeah, man. Stand on the Drakari train for sure. I've been talking to Brian about some different ideas, but yeah, I think I'll try probably throw a few more grots, like grotesques, into the list.
Yeah,
And maybe play around some other stuff, but yeah, they're actually, yeah, I'm pretty, I think they've got like a lot more play than people think, so yeah, it's
Yeah,
good
mate.
fun.
They do. Sam's got plans.
Yeah,
He's
nice.
got
Yeah, I'm scheming,
No.
I'm scheming, boys, look out.
Nice.
I'm scared.
And speaking of grots, Grot Boy himself is back on the Orcs. Liam, what are we doing, mate?
My list only has 10 Gretchen in it, and that is 1/35 of the maximum numbers of Gretchen that I have run in a list. So we are really slim. We
Now,
are
are you
slimming down
counting
the numbers
Grot
here.
Boilers, Liam?
I am counting Grot Oilers. There were 356, at one for almost every day of the year in a list that I took to Mensa. That was yeah, I'm pretty sure I had like wrist sprains after that event.
Man, I think we've talked about
but-
this before, but we literally had to all collectively come together as a team after every round and bag up you, Gretchen. We all did 2 bags each and then
It was
walked off.
It's
This happened in
literally
Newcastle.
a bonding
Multiple
exercise, right? Where you have to
it
get your
is, yeah.
teammates to pack up your army for you. Because there's no way one human being can do that. It's just not possible. But no,
just all the colour-coded
I'm
baggies.
sticking. Where I had the rubber bands, the pink.
Yeah, it
squad,
was fantastic.
Pink squad 1,
Like-
pink squad 2. Jesus.
Yep. After every round, it was like,
Um,
all right, guys, we need to make sure we bag all these up in the correct baggie so we can go to the next round.
Oh, it was pretty silly. So I'm firmly sticking with Orcs again. To be honest, I definitely jumped the gun. Happy to admit that I was wrong. I was saying pretty firmly that Orcs were like unplayably bad at the turn of the edition and the change of the points. But I've now played them a couple of times and nothing's really changed for them. There's been no
drastic FAQ. There's been no big change, and I think they definitely do have play. Are actually really fun and really cool to play. Orcs had army-wide OBSEC before it was cool, before Marines and Necrons got it. Death Skulls had it first. We're better. We're obviously not, because it's only the infantry. But hey, look, I'm going to take my moment in the sun while I can. The sort of change that I'm making for my list is I'm putting some tank busters back in the army, because, man, tank buster bombs are blast. So when you throw tank buster bombs at anything with 6 man strong, you got, 10 tank busters pumping 30 las cannons out of their hands, which is just hilarious.
That's great.
So I'm looking forward to play that, especially when they're in a truck, so they can sort of just appear where they need to go.
Yeah, Liam, you're like,
I think it's going to be pretty hilarious.
What Inceptors?
Yeah.
Pretty much, man. I'm just sort of like running around trying to find like bigger squads, and I'm like, I might blow them up now. Look, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But end of the day, the foolproof plan of saying, look, if I lose games, it's just because I'm playing orcs. That's my plan.
Classic. Fuck. Well, I for one am very excited to see what the Brisbane guys come up with come January. I got a team together. Sam's actually in that team, so I'll be really keen to see how it all goes. But gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on the show. Any closing comments for anyone before we finish off?
Yeah. Oh, you go, Sam.
I was just gonna say, like, if anyone's considering coming to a teams event, like, absolutely do it. Like, just register. You get some mates along. Like, it's honestly so much fun, and it's just like a really chill environment. I think it's just like a great way to play 40k with your mates, and yeah, definitely do it. Sick.
Yeah.
Words of wisdom.
Straight up.
100%. Well, I made it home safely, so I didn't crash. So
Oh,
there's that piece of
he's made
information.
it.
Yep, I made it home about 5 minutes ago, so we good.
Nice. And Liam, anything before we finish?
Nah, look, I think thanks very much, Brian and Sam, for coming on the podcast. Awesome to have you guys on for the first time. And look, I'm sure in the many events coming up, we'll have a chat again.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, awesome guys. Sounds good.
All good. So, yeah, thanks everyone for listening and making it to the end of the app. If you like what you heard, please give us a like on Facebook, subscribe to us on iTunes, and, leaving us a review always helps new listeners find us. We actually launched a little YouTube channel, and we put all our podcasts up on there now, and looking into 2021, we'll be looking at putting other video content up there, potentially some extra fun stuff for you guys. So keep an eye on that. So if you just YouTube the Normal Blokes 40k, that's us. But yeah, take it easy, guys. Have a good evening. See ya.